Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Peace Podcast. This is season 2, episode 47. Just give me an expert, whatever that looks like. And I actually was looking for a good podcast to listen to. I've been listening to more podcasts lately because I've had some more time to be able to listen to those in the background. And as I was scrolling looking for a podcast, because some of my favorites, I had listened to all the episodes, I thought to myself, who are some podcasters that I haven't listened to in quite some time, but were like pivotal moments in my life and pivotal lessons in my life? And so one of them was Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. And I will link her podcast in the show notes or the description if you want to go back to her. But one of the things that I learned as I was scrolling in my plethora of shows that I like to listen to was that Dr. Rhoberta Shaler had actually passed last April. And a part of my heart broke. And the reason that a part of my heart broke was because her voice was such a presence in my healing journey when I was trying to get out of the most abusive relationship that I've been in my life. And I was not in therapy at that time. And I was consulting people, but there was no one really around me who knew the extent of what I was actually going through. And she did, because she had parents who were narcissistic, and then she had been in relationship and marriage with someone who was narcissistic. And her words were the voice of reason in so many instances where I wanted to stay, where I wanted to go back. And I'm probably going to get emotional on this episode because she didn't know, right? And so like I didn't reach out to her and say, thank you for, and this is not me playing some guilt on myself. It's me just really emphasizing the fact that you really never know who you are impacting in such a gigantic way that the decisions that they're making in their lives require your voice of reason for a while, because they need somebody who truly understands. And she didn't know because I didn't reach out to her and tell her. Yet every week she poured into the people who listened to her podcast, and she episode after episode on a very consistent basis with a whole group that she coached, and she had a whole coaching program, and she dedicated her life to helping women like me to get out of the situation they were in. And so, though I'm very late on knowing that she had unexpectedly passed, because this was, last April, I think I stumbled upon that at the right time, because the first thing that I thought of when I saw that she had passed was, how lucky am I that I didn't know that she passed, because I'm so beyond that point in my life that I no longer need to tune into her every week to hear her voice of reason. How lucky am I that she helped me navigate the path that I was on so meticulously from such a far distance that I no longer needed to tap into her wisdom in order to maneuver my life in a healthy way with healthy people. And so I consider it lucky that I wasn't, in the throes of what I was going through when she passed, enough so that I didn't have to tap into her podcast anymore, and hadn't even attempted to, since she had posted her last several videos. And so I wanted to pay a tribute to her, because when I say that she was one of the voices, she was the main voice in me understanding what I was dealing with, and that I needed to get out of it. And so because of that, I felt like I needed to give you the 10 lessons from Rhoberta Shaler that changed my life and allowed me to be brave enough to leave the most toxic relationship that I've ever been in. So Thank you, Rhoberta, for being the person that you were and for having such an impact on people when you didn't even know it. Your life was a true tribute to what it looks like to be selfless and to use your testimony to change and shape the people around you. So 10 lessons that I learned from Rhoberta Shaler were, the first one is what a hijackal was. And she coined this term, and I always loved it because the reason that she even developed the term in the first place was so impactful for me. Rhoberta said that there was no point in trying to diagnose people on your end because, one, that's not our job. We don't have the credentials to diagnose someone, but two, it doesn't matter. What their diagnosis is doesn't matter. You don't have to try to convince yourself that somebody's a narcissist in order to feel like it's safe enough to leave. So she makes this word hijackal because that's what you can call the people who are just toxic for you in your life. See, if you're like me, you needed them to have a label, or you needed to know the true extent of what you were dealing with as far as their personality disorder is concerned. But to her, it mattered less about what their title was and more about how they were making you feel. So a hijack was a person with toxic traits, and they create toxic chaos in your life. And so the first lesson I learned from her that hijackal is enough. Knowing that they're toxic is enough. You don't have to have a label for them. If they're toxic to you, meaning they may not be toxic to every person they come in contact with, but if they're toxic to you, then that's enough for you to go. The second one is to stop confusing being loved with being used. And so this one, again, super impactful, because the thing is, when we get into these relationships with people, we tend to want whatever they'll give us, but because we're in such a low state ourselves. And so we'll call being used love. But when they only show you kindness when you're doing something for them, that's not love. And so in my particular situation, it was if I was making him look good, if I was, cooking dinner and doing chores and, all of these things, then I was lovable. But if I had a problem with something that he was doing or needed to bring something up to him, then of course my lovability dropped. He was using me because that's what he needed at the time. He needed somebody on his arm to make him look good. He needed to have, the person who was the mother of his child to still be there and not be absent and not be his child to not be in a broken home. And so because of that, he kept me at arm's length, but showed me crumbs of love and then used me in those spaces as he tried to build my self-confidence in just those areas. Like, look how great you do these things, because he wanted more of those things. So lesson number 2 is just stop confusing being loved with being used, because they're not the same thing. Lesson number 3 was they insist that you aren't good enough, even though you were good enough for them to choose you in the first place. This one is interesting to me because whenever I was getting out of my relationship with my son's father, and whenever I was getting out of that toxic situation, one of the things that he continuously told me was, because you guys know this has been a pain point for me, no one's going to want you if you have 3 kids by 3 different people. He left out the fact that, my first child was with my high school sweetheart who I was with for 9 years. My second child was with somebody who I ended up being engaged to. My third child was with him. And we were also engaged but never got married. And so it wasn't like I was just out here making kids with a whole bunch of people. I was actually, planning a life with these people. But that is beside the point, because the reality of the situation is, when I had 2 kids by 2 different people, he thought I was good enough. And so you will try to be good enough for them to choose you, and they will never choose you because they are not in the business of choosing anyone. They're in the business of choosing themselves. They want life to be easier for themselves. They want to fulfill some sort of void that they have for themselves. So no matter how much they insist that you are not good enough, remember that you were good enough for them to choose you in the first place, and that you can leave, and that you will be good enough to be chosen by you in the future, which will inadvertently make someone else want to be with you as well. Not that that's the goal, but that is exactly what will happen. The fourth lesson is they want you to settle for crumbs. This one was so pivotal for me to understand and know, because I couldn't quite understand why the person that he showed up as in the beginning was not the person that he continued to be. And once she showed me this lesson, my eyes were forever open. They will love bomb you in the beginning. They'll be everything that they know that you want because you've given them the blueprint, because they've asked the right questions and they've taken notes on your answers. And then they will use that information to love bomb you so that it looks like they are completely in love with you, and that you should be completely in love with them, because they've become the version of a person that you said would be good for you. And then they do this slow release model where it's, I'm going to take away pieces of this. So if I gave her 100% now, eventually I'm only going to give her 80. And then I'm going to give her 75. And I'm going to keep rolling it back until I'm starving her so much of the attention and the love that she desires that she's going to settle for crumbs. And not only is she going to settle for them, but she's going to work harder for them just to get nourishment. So it looks like this. In the beginning, they were buying you gifts and they were being kind and they were taking you places and all of this. By the end of their love bombing phase, when they've done this slow release model, you are lucky if you get a conversation. You're lucky if you get a kiss or a hug. You're lucky if you get any intimacy beyond what they want to use you for in the bedroom. And they'll blame it on the way that you've behaved or things that you've done. But then, unbeknownst to you, one day they wake up and they give you pieces of what they used to give you in the beginning. So what I equate it to is, a child who is being malnutrition, right? So like they're being neglected. And so they went from having these huge feasts and home cooked meals to not getting any food. So then they eat things that they would have eaten before, because they're so hungry that that's giving them nourishment. And then because someone's giving them that, they feel like they're being cared for by this individual. All of that to say that they want you to settle for those crumbs so that they can do less to get more from you. If they do less, then they can still get more from you because they've convinced you to believe that you have to work for those crumbs. So you work even harder for even less of those crumbs. The fifth lesson is that walking on eggshells is a design. It is a design. It is not something that you just made up in your head that you have to be careful when you're around this person because they're a ticking time bomb. They want you to be afraid of them. They want you to be afraid of them, and they want you to make it your mission to please them so that they will have control. Because hijackals want control, adoration, and some sort of admiration and power. And when they have those things, then they want more of those things. And so they look at the design of the way that they got it in the first place, and they do more of it to get more of it. So when you find yourself afraid to bring your request to somebody because you're afraid of how they're going to blow up at you, just know that that is by design. They have put you in that situation so that you will not bring your request to them, because then they don't have to do anything about it. You just internalize them and push them to the side. And so that you will not be chaos in their lives, and they can control your every move because you know what sets them off and you will not do that. So if they get set off by that thing enough times, you will collect that as data in your brain to say, well, I shouldn't do that anymore. And the easiest way to control you is to get set off by everything, so that you are walking around on this very small path of things that you're allowed to do because you don't want to frustrate them. It is a design. It is a control design. Number 6 is you are not the narcissist if you're questioning whether you're the narcissist. Oh my gosh, did she set me free when she said this? Boy, oh boy. She said if someone has narcissistic personality disorder, they do not self-reflect, nor do they take accountability. And if you're self-reflecting and you're trying to take accountability, then guess what? You're not the narcissist. Now, we all have toxic traits. So let's level set there right now. Every single person on this earth is void of perfection. And so, therefore, every single one of us has toxic traits. It does not mean that we are toxic people. It does not cause us to be a hijackal just because we have toxic traits. But there are certain diagnosable disorders that if you are self-reflecting and you are taking accountability, you cannot be one of those. And narcissism is one of them. So if you find yourself questioning whether you're the narcissist, or if by the narcissist you've been told that you're the narcissist over and over and over again, the likelihood of you being a self-aware and accountable narcissist is bare minimum, because those are actually character traits to help to diagnose whether someone is a narcissist or not. Someone who doesn't take accountability, someone who lacks empathy, and someone who does not self-assess. So that's why narcissistic personality disorder is one of the very rare diagnosed disorder, because those people will not go, even when they go to therapy with you, they're going there to try to get somebody on their side to prove you wrong. They're going there so somebody will shine the glorified spotlight on them, and they can pretend to be this great and wonderful person, so that they have someone in their corner saying that you should continue to do all the things that they've told you to do so they can control you. If you've questioned whether you're the narcissist, you're probably not the narcissist. The number 7 is relationships must have, and she repeated this in almost every single episode, equality, reciprocity, and mutuality to be healthy. If you are in a relationship that lacks one of those things, equality, reciprocity, and mutuality, then there's probably a chance that that's an area that you're going to need to work on very quickly, or the relationship is going to fail. Equality being that both of you have the same space, both of you have the same ability to be human, both of you, like, whatever exists for one exists for the other. And that doesn't mean that you get the exact same thing. It just means that you each get what you need. And reciprocity just means that if something is being done for me, then it's also being done for the other person. So we have this two-way street where we're working with each other to make each other happy. It's not just about one person, it's about both people. And so there's that reciprocity going back and forth. And mutuality, meaning that you are both concerned and have a goal that the relationship lasts and the relationship works, and you're both willing to work for that thing. And I can tell you that in every relationship that I've been in that was not one that was going to last, one, if not all of those things were missing. So when she says in order for it to be healthy, those things must exist, when I started to notice that those things didn't, none of the three in the relationship that I was in, I really understood that this relationship with this person wasn't going to be a healthy one, no matter what I did on my end, because they lacked the ability to give those things back. Number 8, your urge to return to that relationship comes from your love and tendency to see the best. You can't fix people. And so that was so helpful for me, because I used to shame myself and blame myself and feel resentment toward myself because I kept going back. Like, why do you keep going back? You left the situation. You know it was good to leave the situation. You felt free when you left the situation, and yet you keep going back. Why do you keep doing that to yourself? And when she said, no matter how much resiliency you have, no matter how much love you have for that other person, no matter how much time has changed, no matter how much hoovering and love bombing they do, Your relationship is going to come back to the same resting place because your tenacity and your love will never fix or save another person. And that is 100% accurate. That is something that I learned having a parent who was in the heavy throes of addiction. I wanted to fix and save him so badly, but there was nothing I could do because it was his thing that needed to be saved and fixed. That is the same characteristic that I took into relationship. And again, I had to learn there's nothing I could do to save or fix. Number 9, your rule book is different. This is so, so good. And I'm going to say that after everyone because all of the lessons that I learned from that podcast and her were just so relevant to my life. And I had to nail it down to 10, and there are so many more. But when you are with a hijackal or a toxic person, you'll notice that they call you out on a behavior. But if you call them out on that behavior later, like let's say it's 6 months down the road, they're going to be like, are you keeping records of wrongdoing? Why are you keeping notes on the mistakes that I'm making, right? Instead of just admitting that they've made the same mistake. Because when you say something like, yeah, but like 6 months ago when I did that, you lost your mind. So like, why is it not a big deal now? They'll be like, oh, are you keeping records of my wrongdoings? Was that like they never can focus on the thing that is actually true, which is the rules that they have do not apply to you. So what I mean by that is the rule books aren't the same. So they have rules for you that they do not have. You cannot hold them to those same rules. So when you are in a relationship with this person, it looks like what I named before. When you're co-parenting with this person, it looks like, oh, look at her. Now she's dating someone else. Da 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 da. There's something wrong with something you're doing. But then they go have a whole girlfriend, move in with her, get married, and that's all fine. Because now something's wrong with your choice, not necessarily the fact that you're actually seeing somebody, right? The rules do not apply to them. None of them. They don't have to parent the way that they expect you to. They don't have to take care of their children the way they expect you to. They don't have to relation the way that they expect you to relation. They don't have to do anything that they expect you to do because the rules only apply to you and were created specifically for you so that they could be void of accountability. They're never going to be the same. No, they know they're not the same. So when you brought up that time where they hold you accountable for the thing, but they're not being accountable for the thing, they know that. They know that, and they don't care because the reality is they're not creating rules to make things better. They're creating rules to control you. And those rules don't apply to them because you're not there to control them. And lastly, you will always be the bad guy. You will always be the bad guy because their number one goal in life is to win. If you're in a court hearing with them, they do not care if they annihilate your character. They do not care if they lie, even though they are lying under oath. They do not care if they paint the picture of you as a horrible and vile person. They want to win. And winning to them looks like turning everyone against you, even if that includes your own child. I know this because in my situation, even after he had to go to the parenting classes, even after he had to sit in those court hearings with them telling them that the therapist had said specifically that he was involving his child in parental alienation, even though he knew all of those things, he still did them because his goal is to win. So even now, though I would never speak poorly about any of my children's fathers in front of them, he continues to speak poorly about me because his goal is to win. And when we were in the relationship, that's exactly what he did. So if he had to use physical force, if he had to use intimidation tactics, if he had to threaten my children or my house or my car or whatever it was, he was going to use that because it gave him power and control. So it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how much you think you can justify your own behaviors. They do not care. You will always be the bad guy because they're only concerned with winning. Now, this was actually not the topic that I was going to be talking about this week, but as soon as I landed on the fact that Rhoberta Shaler had passed away, I just couldn't go another week without recording the skills that she taught me and the lessons that she taught me, because I'm telling you, they were a fundamental part of my healing and growing. And if you have someone like that in your life, I don't care if it's an Instagram personality. I don't care if it's Jay Shetty, who probably gets 1,000,000 inboxes a week. Let them know the impact that they've had on your life. Because I'm sure that Rhoberta got a ton of inboxes, but there's a part of me that wishes that she would have known that she was the driving force for me breaking free from the bondage that I was in. And because of that, I've in turn made it my life's mission to speak to people using my testimony, hoping that it'll help them break free. If that's you today and this message has resonated with you, please go to my social media platforms, like and subscribe. Leave me a 5-star review so that this message gets out to more people. Share it with your closest friends, because I know that we can be in a healed place and think that no one wants to hear this, but there are friends that you have that are sitting in a bondage that you've already healed from, and their words of encouragement and their understanding and experience with the same situation will absolutely make someone feel seen and will absolutely lead them to a place of healing the same way Rhoberta's words did for me. So thank you for tuning in. And just one more time, thank you, Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, for being who you were. I appreciate you so much for helping me to learn the lessons I need to learn to get to a place of freedom. And I hope me passing on these lessons to you, my listeners, will do the same thing. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time.